So welcome to Sunday night, and the theme we're looking at, we've started a new theme for the year, which is looking at stories, symbols and myths. And we've started out, we're carrying that on for the whole year. But for the next few months, we're going to be looking at a kind of sub-theme, which is the system of practice, or the stages of the spiritual path. And these are these 5 aspects here: integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth and receptivity. So for the next few months we're going to be looking at, within this theme of stories, myths and symbols, we're going to be looking at these 5 aspects of our spiritual life. And at the moment we've been looking at integration, so we've had some talks the last couple of weeks about integration, and that's what I'm going to be talking about this evening. So what is it? What is integration? Well, we've all got an identity, we've all got an idea of who we are, but we don't always act consistently with that idea. We don't always act consistently with our idea of who we think we are. And if we look closely at our identity, it's more as though we've got lots of different selves almost. It'd be more accurate sometimes to say we've got lots of different selves. And it's though we're a collection of different selves. And on the intermediate course, we use the analogy of the horse and the rider to explain kind of this relationship between some of the different parts of ourselves. We relate the rider of the horse to being like our rational intellect, our rational mind, that, in a way, our idea of ourselves, where we make a decision, we think we're going to make a certain action. And then we compared the horse to our emotions, in a way, our deep emotional drives. And the horse just goes wherever it wants to go, so we might decide we're going to go in that direction over there, and we set off to go that direction, but the horse just goes wherever it wants to go, basically. The horse just goes after whatever it wants to go after, basically. So we use this analogy, which you'll have come across on the intermediate course, just to describe the conflict between, you could say, the kind of the human part of us and the animal part of us, the kind of maybe the head and the guts and the heart, or intellectual side, and maybe our deeper emotional drives. And you can see this kind of analogy with the horse and the rider you can see it in our everyday lives. So we might make a decision, well, I'm going to stop snapping at people, and then before we know it, we've snapped at somebody, before we've realised it. So we've made this decision, but we were unable to act on it. It's just like our emotions have taken over. Or we might decide, well, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and meditate as soon as my alarm goes off. And then the alarm goes off and it's cold and it's tired, and it's as though we're a different self, and we think, well, actually, I'm not that interested as I was last night. It's as though we're a different self in the morning. So, you could say it's as though we've got a rider and a horse, or you could even say we've got a kind of collection of horses, a kind of whole, I don't know what the collective term for horses is, but maybe a herd of horses. We've got lots of different emotional drives which kind of pull us in different directions. So we're kind of pulled in all these different directions, and what that means is we're in conflict. We're just less effective because we're just torn in these different directions, and it makes us less effective. And this stage of integration is about trying to become aware of the different drives within us, become aware of the different aspects of ourselves, and to try and gather them together in a way so we can become more effective. We can make a decision and follow it through. We can just become a more effective person, a more effective practitioner. And that's what this stage of integration is looking at, and this aspect of our spiritual life. And Satyajyoti last week, she used the idea of, she called integration becoming wholehearted, which I really liked. Becoming wholehearted about what we decide to do. So I think that's a really nice way of putting it, becoming wholehearted about our practice. So I want to talk a little bit about symbols of integration. So in different cultures, there are symbols that represent the kind of the human bit of us and the animal bit of us, you could say. It's as though we've got this kind of, we compared the rider to the intellectual part. And there's a part of us which is refined, maybe kind of noble, has quite kind of skillful aspirations. Is that part of us? And you could compare that part of us. I think it's useful to compare the attributes, the qualities of animals and humans. So compared to an animal, we look quite refined some of the time, quite intelligent some of the time, compared to an animal at least. And Yeah, but an animal, they're very powerful, they're very graceful. If you think of something like a lion or a horse, they're really powerful animals, powerful beasts, very graceful, very strong compared to a human. But then, an animal will have less intelligence, its drives will be kind of coarser, less refined, around kind of sex and food, basically. That will be the kind of the coarser drives of an animal. And you can see, well, we've got those aspects to us as well. We've got the refined bits of us, and we've got maybe the kind of coarser energies within us as well. We've got both of those aspects. And, if we could harness that kind of powerful strength, the really powerful energy of our maybe coarser aspects, we can become very effective, actually. We can become really effective if we can harness that energy. And there's symbols in different cultures which I think illustrate this. So, for example, there's the symbol of the manticore, which I discovered through listening to a talk by Bodhinaga. And a manticore has got, I believe, the head of a human and the body of a lion, and I think the tail of a scorpion is that way. But I relate to the kind of the lion and the lion's body and the human's head. And so you've got the kind of the power and the grace of the lion, but with the kind of the clarity and the intellect, the intelligence of the human. And the Sphinx as well from Egypt is a kind of combination of a human head and a lion's body. So kind of illustrating from a different culture the same principle. And you've also got the centaur. The centaur has got a horse's body and a human head. So it takes our analogy of the horse and the rider and puts them together. You've got the body of a horse, you've got the grace and the nobility, the strength of the horse, and you've got the head of a human. So I think what these different symbols, there's also actually a Buddhist symbol, the Shang bird, which has got the head and the arms, the torso of a human, but the wings of a bird. So you get these symbols which are kind of animal and human combined. And I think what they're illustrating is, in a way, a unified being with this human part of us and the animal part of us unified, an integrated being, a whole being. And the task of us, our task is to unify these different aspects of us, to try and bring the kind of the energy, the strength, the power, maybe these coarser energies within us, but kind of get them to serve, the kind of our more refined energies and our spiritual aspirations, to kind of unify those parts of us and not to have them in conflict. So you could say it's like we're kind of part animal, part human, maybe half animal and half human. Maybe we're 80% animal and 20% human. It might be 90% animal and 10% human. But whatever combination we are, the task is to kind of get all the different aspects of ourselves behind our spiritual practice. And one of the ways we can do this is, one of the ways we can kind of speak to the horse, as it were, the kind of our deeper drives, is through the use of the language of the depths, we could call it, which is stories, myths and symbols. These are ways we can talk directly to the kind of animal part within us and try and speak directly to that part. And that's what we're doing throughout this next year in a way. But we're also going to have lots of lists and lots of kind of rational Dharma stuff alongside it. And we've heard over the last couple of weeks 2 different stories which just draw out different aspects of integration from Vedanya and from Satyajoti. And I've got a third story this evening which I hope will just help us to draw out again more of the aspects of what it means to become integrated. And the story I've chosen is a story called Gawain and Lady Ragnell. And it's a story from the Tales of King Arthur, the Legends of King Arthur. And I particularly like this story and the Legends of King Arthur, partly because they do get me interested in it. They stir up these kind of energies within me. They get me interested in, and I like them. There's kind of tales of wizards and dragons and knights and battles, and I like that kind of stuff that gets me going. And but at the same time, there seems to be some wisdom within these tales. There seems to be some wisdom communicated about the spiritual path. So I want to explore this story, this tale with you this evening. So I'll read it out to you. The story begins with King Arthur and his knights. They're away from Camelot, and they've gone across the border into the foreign lands of Scotland, and they've had a battle with the Scots. And they're now back in the northeast in Carlisle, the castle of Carlisle. And they're having a feast, they're having a banquet in their banqueting hall. And all of a sudden in bursts in a damsel in distress, as often happens in these tales. And she cries out, "Arthur, Arthur, please help me." not far from here is a terrible dark forest, where unwary travellers go missing. They're taken, robbed and killed by an evil dark knight who lives in a terrifying castle on a black rock. And today my husband was taken by this evil knight, and I shouted to him, 'King Arthur will surely kill you and avenge my husband.' And the knight shouted back, 'Ha! That Arthur's nothing but a coward. He's too scared to come and fight me.' So when Arthur heard this, he was incensed, and he shouted, 'Go and get my spear, get my horse. This is an adventure for me.' And the other knights and Arthur's nephew Gawain tried to talk Arthur out of going on this quest, because usually the other knights would go on the quest, but Arthur was so, in a way, his pride was pricked, and he wanted to go on this quest himself. So there's no talking him out of it. So he pursued the damsel into the dark forest. He followed the damsel into the dark forest. And just as the sun was setting and darkness was drawing in, they came upon a dark lake with angry dark rocks, upon which sat a grim, foreboding castle. And then the drawbridge lowered, and out rode the most terrible and the largest man King Arthur had ever seen. "Ah, here comes Arthur, the big coward, the big yellow belly," roared the knight. And Arthur was blinded by rage, and he charged across the drawbridge with his spear. But he didn't notice the smile on the face of the damsel. And as soon as his horse stepped onto the drawbridge, it froze, and Arthur was frozen with fear. A deadly fear came over him which he couldn't understand, and he couldn't move any of his arms or legs. And this is devil's work, he thought. And he realised he'd been tricked by the damsel. And the damsel said, "This castle belongs to my mistress, Morgana le Fay," and she was Arthur's sworn enemy and half-sister. "Have pity," said Arthur, trying to reason with the Black Knight. "I will have pity," he replied. "You can leave here for a year and a day, but then you must return with the answer to the riddle I will set you. If you answer correctly, you will be a free man, but if you answer incorrectly, you will be a dead man." So then the knight set Arthur the riddle, and Arthur's horse bolted and ran for miles back in the direction it had come, until they came upon the castle of Carlisle. And so Arthur told Gawain and all the other knights what happened. And they spent the whole of the next year trying to search for the answer for this riddle. They came up with 2 books full of answers to this riddle, but they didn't think they got the right answer. They were pretty sure they hadn't got the right answer. So it wasn't looking good for Arthur. And a year and a day later, after that encounter with the Black Knight, Arthur set off back into the dark forest, followed by Gawain. Actually, Gawain said, "I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go into the dark forest with you." And Gawain with his nephew. So they got just to the edge of the dark forest, when all of a sudden they came upon a dazzling white figure on a white horse. And as the figure came closer, it was a lady on a white horse. And Gawain was a bit of a ladies' man. But as the figure came closer, he drew back, his face grew pale, and he drew back in horror, because on the horse was the most hideous creature he'd ever seen, the most hideous hag he'd ever seen. Her face was red, her teeth were yellow, and she had a neck which was like a trunk. And in her eyes she had red-rimmed eyes which were full of sorrow and suffering and pain. And so they greeted her politely, because that's what the knights did. They greeted her politely. And she said to Arthur, I know where you're going, and you're riding to your doom because you haven't got the answer to the riddle. And I was thinking about doing an old hag's voice, but I won't do it. Just imagine the voice of an old hag. I know where you're going. Something like that. And but she said, I know the answer to the riddle. I can give you what you're looking for, but I can only give the answer on one condition. So King Arthur, well, name it. What's the condition? And she said, well, I want by the end of today to be married to a noble knight from a noble family. And King Arthur said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't ask if any of my knights to you. I can't do that, I'm afraid. There's no way I could do that. But then Gawain said, well, wait, I'm King Arthur's nephew. Will you marry me? And the hag said, well, of course, I'll marry you. And so the Gawain, he gave himself to be married to this hideous hag to save King Arthur. And the hag whispered in King Arthur's ear what she thought the answer was to the riddle. And Arthur rode off back to see the Black Knight in the grim, foreboding castle. So, out rode the Black Knight, and to begin with, Arthur started to reel off some of the answers he got from these two books throughout the last year. And the knight said, this is it, you're a dead man, Arthur. And Arthur, wait a minute, I've got this one answer from a hideous hag in the forest. She gave me this answer. And he told the Black Knight what the hag had told him. And the Black Knight was, that hag, Lady Ragnell, she's called Lady Ragnell, and she's a cursed hag, and she's gone and foiled our plan. So the Black Knight wasn't too happy about this. But Arthur was a free man. He was a free man. He'd foiled the Black Knight, he'd got the answer to the riddle, and he rode back to meet Gawain and his bride-to-be. And what did he say to Gawain? He said to Gawain, what did he say? He said, mine is the joy from escaping death, to Gawain, but yours is a sorrow from which death is the only escape. So he felt quite sorry for Gawain, because Gawain, in order to save King Arthur, had to marry this hideous hag. So the three of them rode back to the castle, to the Carlisle castle, and Arthur told his servants to put on a great wedding feast. And the crowds were cheering, but when they saw Gawain and his bride-to-be, a great hush fell over the crowd, a great silence, and a kind of sorrowful feast followed. And then the feast was over, and it was time for Gawain to take his bride up to the honeymoon suite. And the hag had become a bit tipsy by this point from the feast, and she hissed in her kind of quite a spiteful voice, "Kiss me, Gawain, kiss me like a bride should be kissed by a bridegroom." And Gawain, well, he turned and looked and saw the sorrow and the suffering in the eyes of the hag, and he kissed her on the lips. But then he turned away in revulsion and was sobbing and shaking at the kind of this horrible fate. And then a loving, soothing voice shouted, "Gawain, Gawain!" And he turned round, and where the hag had been stood, there was now the most beautiful damsel that he'd ever seen, he'd ever set eyes upon. And he said, "Well, where's my wife? Where's the Lady Ragnell?" And she said, "I am your wife, Gawain. I am the Lady Ragnell. And I've been put under a curse by Morgana le Fay. But with your act of selfishness and kindness, I've been freed from the curse, but only for 12 hours of the day. And now you must decide which 12 hours I will be in the form of a beautiful damsel, and which 12 hours I'll be in the form of a hideous hag. So you must decide whether you want to face the embarrassment of having a hideous hag in the court in front of all the noble men and women, and then come home to a beautiful wife, or whether you want to have a beautiful wife to show off in front of all the nobles and the noble men and women, but then have to come back and endure me turning back into this hideous hag in the evening." And so Gawain was faced with a difficult, in a way, an impossible decision to make. But Gawain said, "Well, yours is the greater suffering, lady. Yours is the greater suffering. You would have to choose whether to enjoy the harsh looks and the disapproval of the noble people of the court during the day, and then you would have to endure the pain and the anguish of seeing your husband turn away in aversion when he saw you turn back into your hideous form. So yours is the greatest suffering, lady. So you must make the choice. You must decide which is easiest for you to endure." And Lady Ragnell said, "Gawain, you're so kind and so generous. With that compassionate answer, by giving me the choice, you've now freed me completely from the curse. I'm now completely freed from the curse. So the whole of the time I'll be a beautiful damsel." So it was a happy ending to the story. Gawain and Ragnell had a happy ending. They lived together as man and wife. And they bore a son who legends say was Parsifal, who went on to discover the Holy Grail. So it's a curious tale, an interesting tale. And you might think, well, what's that got to do with Buddhism? What's it got to do with integration? It might be a very nice tale, but what's it got to do with integration? So what I want to do is hopefully to draw that out with these five different aspects of the tale. So, to begin with, there's the image. Well, there's the image to begin with, actually, of the round table, King Arthur's round table. And when King Arthur's round table was first formed, there was quite a few empty seats around it. There's a few knights already, but there's quite a few empty seats. And throughout the legends, throughout the tales, as more and more knights become part of King Arthur's court in a way, the seats begin to fill up. And you can see the symbol of the round table actually as being a symbol of integration, a symbol of wholeness. And as all these knights join, well, they're a symbol of, in a way, of kind of more and more parts of us being gathered in a way, gathered together. So you could say, well, to begin with, the round table and the knights joining the round table is a strong symbol of integration, the integration of different parts of us. You could also see the different parts of the different characters within the story, in the same way as we approached the Lord of the Rings a couple of weeks ago, where we said we could see the different characters in the story maybe as being different aspects of ourselves, representing all these different parts of our being, these different aspects of ourselves. So first of all, you've got the knights. You've got the kind of very noble, ethical knights. And they're a symbol of the rider on the horse. They're kind of the intellectual, the kind of, the ethical, the skillful, the kind of the conscious, rational part of us. And so that's the knights. But then you've also got the hag, the hideous hag in the dark forest. So what does the hag represent in the dark forest? Well, the hag represents the coarser, the uglier aspects of ourselves. These uglier drives within us, the kind of these less beautiful bits within us. The emotions like anger, lust, jealousy, hatred. And they perhaps don't fit in with our view of ourselves, our idea of who we should be, who we ought to be. So the hag represents the bits of us we don't want to see. So the bits that we pretend aren't there, the drives we just don't want to be there, the drives we don't want to see. And there's a lot of conditioning in a way to make us not want to see those drives. We're conditioned as children to think, well, there's parts of our experience that's unacceptable. Society tells us there's parts of our experience that's unacceptable, things we're not supposed to experience, drives that aren't supposed to be there. And without giving it a second thought, what we do is just to kind of try and banish those parts of our experience, just to kind of push them away, to banish them. We don't want to take responsibility for them, we just want to forget about them. And we heard a couple of weeks ago, Vidanya told the tale of Lantern's worm, the lantern worm. And there was a similar tale where a knight, and he came across a strange, evil-looking fish and threw it down the well. And in a way, that's what we want to do. These bits of us that we don't like, the drives within us that don't fit in with our idea of who we should be, well, we just throw them down the well. We don't want to have anything to do with them. We just want to get rid of them. And they become blind spots, actually. They become things that we just can't see. They're still there, but we just can't see them anymore. So it might be completely obvious to everybody else that we've got a particular trait. All our friends can see it. People around us can see it. It's really obvious, but we can't see it at all. It just becomes a blind spot. It's quite odd how that works, actually. We just completely miss parts of our experience that are really obvious to other people. So if somebody's unintegrated, they might not know themselves very well. They might think they know themselves well, but actually there'll be lots of different parts of them they may not be aware of. And in the psychology of Carl Jung, Carl Jung was a psychologist who came up with, he developed a lot of our thinking around archetypes, symbolism, myths, and the idea of there being an unconscious. And Carl Jung came up with a term called the shadow for these parts of our experience. He called it the shadow. It's the bits of us that we don't have, it's not in the light, we don't see them, it's the bits of us that we don't want to know about, and he called that the shadow. And in other words, the shadow is represented in this tale by the dark forest, the deep dark forest where the hideous hag resides. So the hideous hag resides in darkness, in the shadows of the dark forest. So it communicates in a way a lack of self-awareness, the dark forest and the hideous hag. And what's the danger? What's the danger of having these parts of us hidden away and not experiencing them, not taking responsibility for them? What is the danger of that? What's the danger of being blind to these drives? What happens is if we repress these emotions, if we're not aware of them, if we don't want to experience them, then the energy goes underground. And it might be then expressed in ways we don't realise or we're not in control of. And maybe it turns actually inwards on ourselves, the anger that we're repressing, hatred might turn inwards on ourselves, it becomes destructive inwardly. And that has an effect on the people around us as well. So and also when they're in the dark recesses of our mind, Well, these emotions, they take on to us quite a hideous, terrifying form, like a hideous hag. And we heard how Lambton's fish, when he threw it down the well, just grew and grew. It became, in the end, a goggle-eyed monster. It became this terrifying monster, which started off just as a bit of a strange-looking fish. And so if we bury parts of ourselves, they take on quite a scary form to us. And in a way, it's almost like there's just this vague anxiety that there's bits of us we don't like. There's bits of us that are quite monstrous, and we don't want people to find out about them. But because we don't really look, we don't really want to look, we don't know what they actually are, but we're just sure there's bits of us we don't want people to find out about. There's kind of these hideous, monstrous bits of us. And this act of trying to hide parts of us, well, what we do, it creates a false picture of ourselves. It creates an untrue picture of ourselves. It creates a false log. We heard last week how the story of Donald Crowhurst, who had this false log, and the really terrible consequences of that. And that's what we're doing. If we're kind of trying to hide bits of ourselves, we're creating a false picture. And that's painful, actually, to have this kind of inner split. Cuts us off from who we really are. It cuts us off from being able to truly be with other people, in communication with other people, because there's always part of us we're trying to hide that we don't want others to see. So it means we're cut off from other people, we're cut off from ourselves, and it leaves us in quite a shallow part of ourselves. It cuts us off from, in a way, a depth of experience. It leaves us with a quite shallow experience of ourselves. So there are some of the dangers of repressing these bits of ourselves. And one of the symptoms, this was a position probably to a large extent I'm still in, but especially a few years ago I was very much in this situation. And one of the symptoms of this was that I just didn't really know how I felt about things. I was kind of so cut off from my emotions. I just didn't really know what I thought about things, what I really felt about things. And also felt depressed sometimes as well, just because I was just out of touch with who I really was, how I felt about things. So that's one danger. One danger is that we just repress these emotions and don't experience them. We repress them. The other extreme, you could say, actually, is that we're still unaware of them, but we're blindly consumed by them. We just act blindly out of these emotions without awareness. And this is symbolised by the wheel of life in Buddhism. So hopefully I can just take this off. So, another thing we see on the beginner's course is a simplified version of the wheel of life, which shows our reactive mind, in a way, and our habitual tendencies. And this is what happens if we're just blindly acting out our emotions without being aware of it. We get a feeling comes up, we don't like it, and we just blindly react without being aware of what we're doing. And we just create the same experience, we create the same self, the same world. And it's this experience of acting blindly, being driven by our emotions, in a way being controlled by our emotions blindly. And that's, in a way, the opposite extreme of repressing them. And so in the story you've got King Arthur and his horse who just blindly charge after the damsel because their pride have been pricked, his pride's been pricked by the accusations of being a coward. And then again, when he's accused of being a coward, he gets blind with rage. Arthur and him and the horse charge onto the drawbridge, and then in a way into their doom, into their terrible consequences. So that's what happens. We just react. The world pushes our buttons, and we react blindly without being aware of it. And another symbol of this comes from Greek mythology. There's a symbol of the Minotaur, and the Minotaur has got, I think, the head of a horse or a cow maybe, or a cat or something like that. The head of some kind of animal. And a bull. I was nearly right. The head of a bull and the body of a human. And so it's like the opposite way around of what we're looking for. He's got none of the strength of an animal, he's got just the strength of an ordinary human. And he's got none of the intelligence or awareness of the human aspect. He's got the head of a bull which charges around. So the Minotaur is the reverse of what we're looking for. And of course a Minotaur lives banished deep in a labyrinth, deep under the ground, deep below the castle, where the hideous hag would live, and where we find all the beasts in tales and legends. Yeah. So the depths of the forest are a scary place full of beasts and monsters and hags. But if we want to make progress in the spiritual life, if we're committed to growth and awareness, we need to go into the uncomfortable places. We need to go into those places. And it's the commitment of Gawain to serve in a higher cause. So that leads him out of the safety, or to begin with, out of the safety of Camelot, into the dangerous parts of Scotland, outside the kind of known territory of England. It leads him out of the safety of the castle to accompany King Arthur. And it's his commitment to serve in a higher cause. And it's only when that takes him into the deep dark forest, and it takes him into contact, it brings him into contact with the hideous hag that lives in the deep dark forest. So it's only really when we're committed to something that we see how integrated or unintegrated we are. That's how we get to know more of ourselves. It's when we commit to something that we get to see the bits of ourselves that aren't committed, actually, that don't want to practice, that don't want to meditate. We get, when we really commit to practice, it's when we get to know ourselves better. We get to see the different parts of ourselves. And going back to the horse and the rider, it's only really when the rider makes a decision to go somewhere, commits to going somewhere, that actually learns that the horse is the one in charge. Actually, the horse is going in a different direction. It's not him that's in charge. It's only through making that decision, that commitment, he learns that about himself. It's Gawain's commitment to serving King Arthur and saving his life that sees him ending up getting married to the hideous hag. And the hag is the only one who's got the power to save King Arthur. Gawain sees he can't fulfill his desires, he can't save his uncle without committing to the hag and without actually becoming joined to her as man and wife. So we get this next part, which is union and marriage. So I'm not talking about kind of marriage in a conventional term, I'm talking about, in a way, committing to the hideous hag, committing to those parts of us, committing to the parts of us actually that we'd rather not commit to, we'd rather not get to know. But that's what Gawain has signed up to. He's signed up to saving, he's committed to saving King Arthur. The only way to do it is to marry the hag. So if we're committed to spiritual growth, we need to face up to ourselves, our true selves, as we really are, warts and all. As the light of awareness begins to shine into these darker forests, these shadowy places within our depths, well, there might be things that we might be alarmed to discover about ourselves. Am I really like that? Did I really do that? But it's a much better position to be in. It might actually feel like we've gone backwards when we start to find these things out about ourselves, but it's a much better position to be in than when we started. Because then we can move forwards. Once we get a really clear picture of where we're at, from there we can move forwards. And Bodhinaga said a couple of weeks ago that we need to start from where we are, because if we try to start from where we think we should be or where we ought to be, well then our spiritual life is just an illusion, it's just a fantasy. We've got to start from where we really are. If we're committed to the spiritual life, we need to face our true selves. And we need our depths, actually. We really need the hideous hag. We need all the different bits of us. So I'll talk a bit about that. Why do we need the hideous hag? It'd be quite convenient, actually, if we didn't need those parts of us. It'd be very good if we could just, continue to get rid of them or just destroy them. And usually in Western tales, quite often in Western tales, you get the hero will slay the dragon, will slay the hideous beast. Well, that often happens, not in all, in some encounters. And perhaps they've been influenced more by maybe a Christian approach to good and evil, to good and evil. But from a Buddhist perspective, we actually need to harness the energy. We need the energy of our depths. We can't afford to cut them off. We can't afford to to push them away or bury them. We need that energy, because we can't be effective otherwise. If our energy is locked up, what we're doing is locking away our potential. We're locking away who we really could be, our future. Actually, our future selves is being locked away. And there's another tale which draws this out for me, which is the tale of Briar Rose from Grimm's fairy tales, and it's the inspiration for Sleeping Beauty. And in the Disney film, I don't think the bit you see at the start from the Grimm's fairy tale is that what happens is that there's an elf, there's 13 elves, and there's only room for 12 of them to be invited to a christening party for a new baby, a princess. So one of the elves isn't invited, the 13th elf isn't invited. And she's furious about this, and so she turns up uninvited to the christening and puts a curse on the princess, which means that the princess is then once she turns 16 will be asleep, will be asleep. And I think for me this is a symbol that says, well, if we don't include all the different parts of us, if we don't invite all the different parts of us, what we're doing is our potential will lie dormant. Actually, who we really could be lies dormant. Our true potential, our beauty, is just as asleep. It's asleep, locked away. Because what happens is, in a way, if we're in conflict with different parts of ourselves, if we're kind of fighting a bit of ourselves continuously, well, a lot of energy goes into that. A lot of energy goes into trying to keep up a persona, to trying to keep up a non-true picture of ourselves. And once we can let go of all of that, actually, a lot of energy becomes available. Lots and lots of energy becomes available once we just stop trying to fight, who we really are. So another analogy I like, which is a bit less mythic, is the analogy of an orchestra. So if you imagine that you're the conductor of an orchestra, and it's not the best orchestra, maybe the orchestra I used to play in when I was a teenager, and some of the musicians are quite talented, and some of the musicians turn up a bit late without practicing like I used to do. They're not as good, and they might play a bit out of tune, a bit out of harmony, not quite in time with everybody else. So you're the conductor of this orchestra. What do you do? What do you do with this kind of motley crew of musicians? One approach you could do is to kind of try and turn down the volume if that was possible, to try and mute the sections of the orchestra that weren't in time with everybody else. Or you could just get rid of them. You could get rid of lots of different sections of the orchestra, so you're just left with the violin section, which plays a really nice, pleasant tune. But what you're doing if you do that, you're removing the potential of that orchestra to make a really powerful, rich symphony, actually. If you could work with all the different sections of the orchestra, get them to play in harmony with each other, then they can together produce a really powerful sound, a really rich, powerful sound. And in a way, that's the difference between if we've just got this one part of us, which we're happy to present to the world. Well, that's just quite a narrow part of us. But if we can gather all the different parts of ourselves behind our practice, then we can create we can have a really powerful effect, actually. Yeah, so it's like having the equivalent of having all the different parts of the orchestra there. Yeah, so imagine all of that power that comes from our more animal drives, all the energy we put into chasing sex or food or pleasure. Imagine if we could harness all of that and put that behind our spiritual life, how effective we would be. And we need those coarser energies to give us strength and courage, determination to put up with some of the difficulties on the spiritual life. But maybe this kind of way of talking about Buddhism might not be what you first expect about Buddhism. You might have this picture of a Buddhist, like a Buddhist monk. The typical example of a Buddhist monk who's very kind, very gentle, very patient, very kind of soft. And you don't really see what's going on inside the mind and the heart of the Buddhist monk, but we have this idea of a Buddhist being very pleasant, being very nice. But if we can't destroy those bits of us. We need to harness the kind of coarser, maybe grimier bits of us. So hopefully, there's another thing from physics, actually. The laws of physics, I think I'm true in saying this, that you can't destroy energy. You can only transform energy from one form into another form. You can't destroy energy. And our emotions are a form of energy. So it would follow, really, we can't really, we might try to destroy parts of us, to cut them off. But we actually can't. What we need to do is to transform. We need to transform those parts of us. So how do we do it? It's all very well, but how do we go about it? How do we go about engaging with the kind of hideous hag part of ourselves? How do we go about doing it? How do we transform these aspects of ourselves? And the first thing to say, it's not easy, and it's not a short-term thing. It's something we'll be working with for, pretty much the most of our spiritual life, I imagine. So it's not just a beginner's practice. We need, it's something we'll be continuously working. We're continuously discovering more and more bits of us that we want to transform. But how do we do it? How do we go about doing it? Well, the path to integration comes through mindfulness or awareness. And there are 3 parts to mindfulness that I'd like to draw out this evening. 3 aspects, 3 types of mindfulness that we need on this path of integration. But the first aspect is, rather than pushing away the emotions that we're scared of, rather than trying to constantly fight with them and push them away, actually what we need to do is to turn towards them with kindness. We need to turn towards these parts of us with kindness, with a gentle awareness, a kindly awareness. We need to turn and face these difficult parts of ourselves, particularly in meditation. Just as Gawain turned towards the hideous hag with compassion and kindness and kissed her on the lips, we need to kind of turn towards our difficult emotions when they arise in meditation. We need to face them. We need to welcome them. We need to kiss them on the lips even, like Gawain kissed the hideous hag. We need to welcome those parts of our experience and just be prepared to sit with them, to sit with these difficult emotions in meditation and to welcome them, to have a kindly, gentle awareness. Because if we keep, one of the ways we can work in meditation, which is helpful, is to work with antidotes to the hindrances. So if we've got superficial hindrances that arise, like quite a mild ill will or some, a bit of irritation or some, little bit of sloth and torpor, well, we can work with antidotes to remove those, to get rid of them. But we can also use that way of working to actually avoid facing what's there, to face our experience. We can be looking to try and push away our experience all of the time, rather than turning to face it. So if we've got quite strong emotion arising in meditation, rather than trying to push it away if it's persistent, we can just sit with it actually. We can make that the object of our meditation, just to sit with it, turn towards it with a kindly awareness. And actually, we don't need to do more than that, because just doing that, it will change. Our experience will change. It will begin to transform. Yeah. So when uncomfortable emotions arise in our meditation, we need to snuggle up to them. We need to kiss them on the lips. We need to be gentle and kind with them. And there's a line, I'm going to read out a poem later, from which I was chatting to Moga Vanksa last night by chance. We came across each other on Skype and had a conversation. He's in Wales at the moment. And he told me about a poem by Rumi called The Guest House, which I'm going to read out. But he said that he'd come across this poem on his retreat, and Rumi suggests that we should invite all of our thoughts and emotions into our experience as though they're guests, that we're the owner of a guest house, and we should just invite these emotions in. And he suggested that a good name, a Sanskrit name for his guest house would be, what would it be? Sagradrishti. And he said that means in English, sea view. So that would be the name of his guest house, would be sea view. Sagradrishti. So what we need to do is invite them in. Imagine that we're the owner of a guest house and just welcome in our experience, welcome in these uncomfortable experiences. And just sit with them with kindness. Yeah, and if we don't do that, actually, our emotions, they come with a message. Each of our emotions comes with a message. It comes with the answer to a riddle. Each part of our experience has the answer to a riddle that we're trying to sort out. And if we keep pushing it away, it'll keep coming back, actually. The emotion will keep bothering us until we listen to it, until we pay attention to it. It's only once our emotions have been fully listened to, fully heard, that they will then transform, they will resolve themselves. But if we keep fighting them off and pushing them away, they'll just keep shouting even louder until we listen to them. They'll keep looking like the hideous hag. So that's sati, the first part of mindfulness. It's often actually what's associated with mindfulness in a secular sense, is just being with our experience, being with our present experience in the present moment. And that's on the meditation cushion, but outside of the meditation cushion, it means becoming aware, more aware of our habitual reactive patterns. So when we're blindly acting out of emotions, it means becoming aware of those patterns, becoming aware of our habitual reactive cycles. That's this aspect of sati, of becoming more aware of the present moment. But it's not enough, actually. I did say earlier it was enough, and that wasn't true. It isn't enough. Sati isn't enough on its own. Because you could very well be aware of your emotions. You could say, well, I'm aware that I'm becoming angry right now. Oh, I'm aware I'm kicking the cat right now. Oh, I'm aware I'm punching that man in the face next to me right now. So you can become aware of what you're doing right now, but that isn't enough, actually. It's not enough to become aware. What we need is an ethical vigilance, and that's the second part of mindfulness. It's called apamada. It's the ethical vigilance. It's that which opens up the gap, actually. It's having a set of ethical values that we live by, a way to make choices. It's apamada's in a way, it's maybe the alarm that goes off inside our head, or the voice that says, don't do that, don't punch that man in the face, that's going to have really bad consequences. Don't kick the cat. So that's the voice of apamada, which just tells us not to go with our usual habitual reaction, but that a creative choice is possible. Apamada opens up the opportunity for a more creative response. And unfortunately, it's not enough just to do this once. I recently was surprised that I thought I dealt with an old habit because I'd I'd started to act with it creatively. But what I realised, actually, you can't just do it once. It's not enough to just use apamada once. We have to do it over and over again, because our cycles, unfortunately, they're habitual. The patterns go round and round again. So we just have to stay vigilant. We have to stay vigilant and notice when the world pushes our buttons and when we can act creatively. And it's very, very important. In fact, the Buddha's very last words before he died were, with apamada, with mindfulness, with apamada, strive on. So the Buddha's dying words to his disciples and to us were, with apamada, strive on. So it's just a really crucial part of practice, this ethical vigilance. So sati on its own, this kind of present moment awareness on its own isn't enough. We need apamada. But we need also to know how to make those choices. We need to know how to choose, from one action to another. Lots of options are possible. How do we make our choices? So apamada needs to be informed. It needs to be influenced by sampajana, which is basically, it's sometimes called our purpose, continuity of purpose, being mindful of our purpose. But it's about basically what we're about. It's what our life's about, what's really important to us, what's got most value to us. And being in touch with that, remembering that in those difficult moments. So when there's the opportunities there to grab for the thing we crave after or to push away the thing we don't like, or if we can call to mind what we're about, what's really important to us, well then we're more likely to stay vigilant actually. If we can really bring to mind what's important to us. So for Buddhists we do that by calling to mind the Buddha. We call to mind the example of the Buddha. We might call to mind inspirational people. We do this exercise on the beginner's course as well. We bring to mind somebody that we were inspired by, somebody we want to become like. And then we use that to inform our ethical choices in a way, our set of behaviours. So we use sampajana to come up with a set of ethical guidelines, to come up with our ethical value system. So we do this on the beginner's course. So we've all come across this. Yeah. So it's another reason why it's important we listen to our emotions, because we can make decisions that are informed by our emotions. If we listen to what our emotions are telling us, we can make ethical choices that are informed by our decisions. And so the spiritual life, it's sometimes depicted in a cold way, a kind of passionless way, about eradicating the passions, cutting off the passions. But yeah, by listening to our emotions, we can discover what we really care about, what we deeply care about, what's most important to us, what's really valuable to us, what we really desire to bring about. And so, for example, if we become aware of anger, this is an example, you can become aware of something you're angry about, you can really fully experience that you're angry about something. Well, that informs you actually, that emotion informs you that you really care about this, that you want to change it, that something isn't right, something needs to be changed. But it doesn't mean kind of blindly acting out of the anger and speaking violently or acting angrily. We've still got apamada, we've got a kind of set of ethical guidelines, but if we fully feel what's there, we feel our experience, if we are angry and we feel that, well, it informs our decisions. It gives us, in a way, it harnesses that emotion. Our decisions become informed of that. We're in touch with what we really care about. And Karmala Sheila was on the weekend we went to this weekend, and he said something about fear and anxiety, that if we turn towards fear and anxiety, it's quite mysterious, but it seems to give us the energy that we need to succeed in the task we're scared about. If we kind of turn towards the fact that we're anxious and scared, somehow that gives us extra energy. The fact that we turn towards it gives us the energy we need to succeed. And I'm trying to remember that at the start of this talk I was quite frightened having to stand up and talk to you guys. I think, well, actually, I'm frightened, I'm a bit anxious, it's a bit scary. But if I can just accept that I'm scary, well, actually, it's okay. I can give the talk, and somehow I'm giving the talk without being in conflict with the fact that I'm scary and not wanting to be scared. So just actually allowing it to be there means we're not trying to fight it off. It gives us more energy. So these are the three aspects of mindfulness. And sometimes I use an analogy of sat-nav actually to describe these three aspects of mindfulness. So you can imagine that sati is like we're driving along on the road and we're very aware of, we're really with the road, we're aware of all the dangers, we're aware of how fast we're going, the cars that are going past. And so that's our kind of present moment awareness in the car, in the vehicle. We're aware of where we are now, how fast we're going, all the dangers and all the things like that. Sampajana is the destination that we put into the sat-nav. It's the kind of postcode, so we know where we're heading towards, where we want to go to, where we want to arrive, where we want to end up. And apamada is that lovely voice that says, next right, turn left, or something like that. The next junction, turn left. At the next roundabout, take the third exit. Turn around and start again. Apamada is the voice that tells us, where to go, what direction to go. If we want to actually reach that destination. And we need all three. We need to be in touch with where we want to end up. We need to be in touch with our goal, our ideal. And we need the kind of ethical vigilance to point us in the right direction. And we need to be actually aware of our impulses and our blind reactions. We need that kind of present moment awareness as well. So finally, the last thing to draw out in the tale is the beautiful damsel, the transformation of Lady Ragnell, poor old Lady Ragnell, into the beautiful damsel. So what is it that makes the deeper drives within us ugly? What is it that makes them appear ugly to us? What is it that makes them ugly? Well, the answer is it's selfishness, actually. It's selfishness. Being blown around by the worldly winds, which we heard about last week. Trying to protect our reputation, what others think about us. Trying to grasp after pleasures and hold on to them. These momentary pleasures that can't be kept, but trying to grasp after them at the expense of other people. That turns our emotions into ugly behaviour. It turns our emotions into a really ugly form. And like Lady Ragnell, we're under a spell. We're under the enchantment of an illusion. We've got the illusion that we exist separately from the world around us, and that happiness comes from getting as much as we can at the expense of other people. We're under a spell. We're under an enchantment. And that makes us actually behave in an ugly way. It makes us have an ugly form, a hideous form. But we might have skillful drives to grow, to become bigger, to be attracted to beauty, to want to change the world, to transform the world. We might have very skillful desires and drives. But if we're under this illusion, this enchantment, well, those drives become mutated, they become distorted, they take on the ugly form of a hideous hag. And what was it that freed Lady Ragnell? What was it that turned her into a beautiful damsel? Well, she was completely freed from the spell because Gawain was happy to live with her, happy to live with the hideous hag, to be married to her and to live with her, if necessary. So we need to be happy to face the real us. We need to be happy to live with the hag within us. We need to be happy to face that, face our true selves, warts and all. We need to be happy to own up to who we really are, to ourselves and to other people. And because Gawain, he was prepared to be seen amongst his peers with the hideous hag. He was quite happy for that to happen. He was happy for other people to see Ragnell in the form of a hideous hag. He was prepared for that to be seen. So we need to be prepared for other people to see us as we are, to drop our defences, to drop our pretences, and just to be ourselves, warts and all, with other people. And this, in a way, this gets round this desire for status, for reputation, for praise and approval. It gets round our desire for gain and fame and a good reputation. It starts to undo the spell. It starts to corrode the spell of ego clinging. But what it is that truly releases us from the spell and allows our emotions to appear in their most beautiful form is wisdom. Actually, wisdom. Seeing through this illusory nature of our ego that we're trying to protect. Our reputation is just an idea. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as reputation. It's just an idea. We see through the illusory nature of what we're trying to hold on to, what we're trying to protect. So when we deeply understand the illusory nature of our ego, it removes us from the spell, and we become disenchanted from the worldly winds of gain, pleasure, fame and approval. Integration, funnily enough, we talked about how the different aspects all play into each other. And integration leads to wisdom, it leads to a deepening of wisdom. Because as we gather more and more parts of ourselves together, we become a bigger being, we become a person with more depth to us, more about us. The more we're kind of aware of, the more parts of us we've harnessed, we become a bigger being with more depth to our experience. And what it means is that the teachings going deeper, we understand the teachings more deeply. And we can see this if you do a beginner's course over and over again. So if you teach or support the beginner's class over and over again, well, each time you'll learn something different, or you'll see something which you hadn't seen before, or one of the teachings will just go in much deeper. It'll just seem much clearer, much truer than it did the first time round. So, one of the dangers of the spiritual life is we think we need to read lots and lots of books, learn lots and lots of things to become wise. But actually what we need to do is just to take a few teachings of the Dharma and let them go very deeply, penetrate more deeply into our being. So Sangha as one says, there are no higher teachings. There's no such thing as higher teachings. There's only deeper understandings. There are no higher teachings, only deeper understandings. Yeah. So just to summarise what I've been talking about, if we push away parts of our experience, then we create a hideous hag in a dark forest. But if we turn towards our experience with kind awareness, an ethical behaviour, and a clear sense of who we want to become, well, then we can begin to become comfortable with who we really are. We can start to become comfortable opening up to other people. And then actually we start to see through this illusory nature of our ego clinging. We start to see through this illusory nature of what we're trying to protect. And the spell is lifted. And our ugly drives within us will turn from hideous hags into beautiful damsels. Our emotions are finally free to blossom into their truly beautiful form as compassionate activity. And what I'd like to do is just to read you that poem which Amoga Banksy told me about last night called The Gatehouse by Rumi. This is the gatehouse, no, it's not, it's called The Guest House. The Guest House by Rumi, translated by Kabir Elminsky. Darling, the body is a guest house. Every morning someone new arrives. Don't say, oh, another weight around my neck, or your guest will fly back to nothingness. Whatever enters your heart is a guest from the invisible world. Entertain it well. Every day and every moment a thought comes, like an honoured guest into your heart. My soul, regard each thought as a person, for every person's value is in the thought they hold. If a sorrowful thought stands in the way, it is also preparing the way for joy. It furiously sweeps your house clean, in order that some new joy may appear from the source. It scatters the withered leaves from the bow of the heart, in order that fresh green leaves might grow. It uproots the old joy, so that a new joy may enter from the beyond. Sorrow pulls up the rotten root that was veiled from sight. Whatever sorrow takes away or causes the heart to shed, it puts something better in its place, especially for one who is certain that sorrow is a servant of the intuitive. Without the frown of clouds and lightning, the vines will be burned by the smiling sun. Both good and bad luck become guests in your heart, like planets travelling from sign to sign. When something transits your sign, adapt yourself and be as harmonious as its ruling sign, so that when it rejoins the moon, it will speak kindly to the Lord of the heart. Whenever sorrow comes again, meet it with smiles and laughter, saying, O my Creator, save me from its harm, and do not deprive me of its good. Remind me to be thankful. Let me feel no regret if its benefit passes away. And if the pearl is not in sorrow's hand, let it go and still be pleased. Increase your sweet practice. Your practice will benefit you at another time. Someday your need will suddenly be fulfilled. Thank you.